So last time we started early modern English, and we know that early modern English was between the 14th century, late 14th century, till maybe 18th or 19th century, right? So let me write it out here. So early modern English, so EME, right? So I'll say EME. EME is between late 14th century till perhaps late 18th century or even 19th century, right? And after this, we have PDE, right, which is present day English. So present day English will be after this. Right? In present day English, we have as a consequence of early modern English, as a consequence of industrialization and also exploration and imperialism, we have the spread of English in PDE, right? So spread of English, which is the next issue that we'll be looking at after finishing EME. So we'll be looking at how English has spread around the world, including American English, Canadian English, Australian English, and even to those areas where English is not the first language of the people, of the native people, like Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and other areas, right? So that's a major issue that we'll be looking at after early modern English. So last time we looked at early modern English, right? And you know that early modern English started, this is not the official start date, but one of the major factors is that Caxton, right? William Caxton brought in the first printing press from continental Europe to England, and that brought with it a huge change to the English language, because now you can publish books, right? Relatively with a high speed, right? So this means that literacy went up and people could read and write, and the prices of books went down, right? And literature can be published in English, and people could enjoy, people who could not read or write Latin and Greek, right? They could enjoy literature, reading literature in English. And then we have the Renaissance movement, also Reformation, nationalism, and exploration and colonization, right? So all of these things gave rise to English as a power language, right? As a powerful language. And we looked at also vocabulary, right? In this period, vocabulary is a big thing because you have an influx of Latin and Greek loan words, right? Because the Renaissance movement is a cultural movement that goes back to to Latin and Greek sources in order to draw from those sources in terms of literature, in terms of philosophy, in terms of scientific discoveries, and so on, right? And so there's the objective need to borrow a lot of terms, right? Because when you read Latin sources or Greek sources, they talk about things that are not available in English. So you have the objective needs to borrow terms. And also you have the subjective need, meaning this has to do with people, right? So people want to sound educated, people want to sound cool, so they bring in a lot of loan words, right, from Latin and Greek. And also when people discover new areas, as in the Americas, like North America or South America, they came across animals or flowers or plants that they didn't have, right, in their home. So they had to borrow the words from those native languages, okay? And this is a table that compares Latin and Greek and English, right? You'll see that English is kind of inferior to Latin and Greek in almost all the areas here. That's why loan words from Latin and Greek can come in easily in this period. And the last thing that we looked at last time was the inkhorn and import terms, right? So terms that sound very, very pompous, P-O-M-P-O-U-S, pompous, or terms that sound very awkward because they sound like spoken language rather than, because they sound like written language rather than spoken language, right? And not from a living language, numbers of borrowings, conscious and done by individuals. This is unlike when we borrowed French in Middle English, right? Because when we borrow French, that's a living language. People, the upper classes, they spoke French at that time, right? So it's more natural. But here it's conscious and done by individual, and mainly in the area of natural sciences or philosophy or literature, like that, right? So inkpot or inkhorn, these are containers that people put ink in. So these terms that sound like written language, they just sound like they came straight from written sources. And we have a lot of remnants from the borrowed terms from Latin and Greek. For example, the ity ending, the all ending, here the late and ate ending, the quis is ending. So all of these are Latin grammatical suffixes, right? But there are also suffixes that are lost, but we borrowed them during the Renaissance period, but now we don't use them anymore. And terms that were or terms that used to be considered inkpot or inkhorn terms, these are normal terms now, right? Common terms that we know and we use maybe on a regular basis, right? Anonymous, for example, when you don't know the name, right? And then when you borrow a lot of terms, this might result in what we call doublets, right? Where you borrow those terms from French, and French is related to Latin in the italic branch, as you know, and then you reborrow the original Latin terms, right, in the Renaissance. So you have two words that are from the same origin, but you use them in different contexts in this, this destination in this language, right? And so I should rework this because the alignment here is not good. So we have two columns, right? The for people and the against people. So just to be clear, so the for people, for meaning support, right? So support, supportive people, the for people, and there's the against people, right? So against meaning they didn't agree, right? They didn't agree, right? So pandehada. So for the for people, they support it because they think that support the inkhorn and inkpot terms, right? Supportive of the borrowing, right? The borrowing of Latin and Greek, right? So the for people, why do they support the borrowing of Greek and Latin terms? One of the reasons is that they think that borrowing is natural, right? So it's a natural process. So natural process. Meaning that borrowing terms from other languages is normal, right? It's natural. So we should not be against it. So that's one argument, right? However, the against people, they think that borrowing result in the language not being pure, right? So purity of language is an issue for them, right? So our language should consist of only native words, right? So for example, Korean should only have Korean words, right? Not Japanese words like that, right? Or English words like that. So these are two different viewpoints, right? And second one, the for people. The for people think that newness, right? Newness meaning after a while, the terms that are new to us will not be new anymore. Newness will dissipate. Dissipate is to go away, right? That's also one of the inkpot terms, right? So newness will dissipate. Dissipate is to go away. So once we use these terms for a while, they are not going to be new anymore, like that, right? The against people think that, oh, there is this pedantry, right? pedantry, this is a noun, right, of the adjective pedantic. That's also an Inghorn term, right? Pedantic meaning pedantic or pedantry, which is a noun term. Pedantic meaning sounds like you want to show off your knowledge, right? So when you use hard words, when you use hanja, for example, in Korean, difficult hanja, it means that people might look at you like, oh, you want to show off your knowledge like that. So these are two different viewpoints, right? And finally, the against people think that the meaning is obscure, right? Obscurity. Right? So obscurity, SCU, obscurity, meaning that when you use a lot of written terms, because these terms are not normally used in everyday life, they sound awkward, right? They sound vague. The meaning is obscure, right? Vague. However, the four people think that the meaning will be clear given the context, right? So meaning clear in context like that. So think about whether you are for or you are against. Maybe I'll ask you on the final whether you are for or against borrowing or language change, right? Because as you can see from the examples that we looked at before, right? From the examples that we looked at before, terms that used to be considered Ing-pot or Inghorn terms, they are now no longer new, right, to us, and we use them in everyday life, right? So this is where we left off last time, and we also looked at one passage, right, where where the Ing-pot or Inghorn terms are used, maybe side by side, right, side by side like this. So all of these are Ing-pot terms like pondering, expanding, revoluting, ingent, affability, ingenious, capacity, mundane, affairs, and so on. All of these are not native English words, right, as you know. However, you understand the meaning, but I know that the meaning is not that clear because this is not the style that we would use nowadays, right? So there are many other issues in addition to just the use of Ing-pot or Inghorn terms, right? However, the meaning like ponder, you have to think about it, you have to ponder about it like that. So the meaning is not that it's not clear, but the style rather than the meaning, right? So this is what a group of people used to condemn in early modern English. Okay, so now we move from words, right? So you know that in early modern English word, the morphology, the way that people form words is usually by borrowings, right? Rather than prefixing or affixing. Even although prefixing or affixing existed during that time, the major word formation process is borrowing, right? Now we move to orthography or spelling, right? Orthography has to do with the way we spell things, the way we write things. So in 17th and 18th century, this is later, right? Later early modern English, 17th or 18th century, there is this desire for neatness and conservatism, meaning that people start to feel that they need some rules. They need some rules, right? To abide by, right? Now that we have the printing press, now that we have a lot of words that we borrow from Latin and Greek and other languages that we come across when we explore the world, now there is the need to put some rules onto the language, right? There's the need to put some rules onto the use of language, right? So you know that when these things took place, like the borrowing of words, also the advent of the printing press, it took some years, right, for these things to manifest in full consequences, right? So that's why it happened around 17th or 18th century, a little bit later than after a little bit later than after the printing press was brought to England, right? So there's the desire for neatness and conservatism, French orthography, and then we have also Latin and Greek sources. Now there's the need to lay down the rules, right? That they felt that need during the 17th and 18th century. So English spelling seemed chaotic because of Latin, because of individual variation across writers, as you know, right? Or even within the same text by the same writer, you see a lot of variation, right? Printers took advantage. So printers took advantage of their own dialects, meaning, remember the first printing press was set in London. So London was selected to be the way how people should spell things, right? So bin, 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 which used to spell 3 ways, now there's only 1 way. Fellow, 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 follow, follower. Used to be spelled like, same word used to be spelled many, many ways depending on your dialect, depending on how you pronounce it, right? Now it's only 1 way after the printing press, right? So the printers would just use the form that they are familiar with and form that they think that, oh, this is the right pronunciation, right? So there's only 1 now, right? Rather than many, right? So, so now in response to the need to lay down the rules, right? For spelling and also for grammar, this is for spelling first. So you have manuals, books telling people, like first books telling people how you should spell things in this particular period, right? So this is the first, one of the first spelling books, spelling manuals that tell people how to spell. First part of the elementary, which entreat of the writing of our English language, English tongue, like that. So I don't know what this word is. So this is one of the first spelling manuals, which is interesting, right? If you look at the rules that they try to lay down for people. For example, this is one rule: omit superfluous letters, right? Omit redundant letters, in other words. So put TT, now just 1 T, grab BB, just 1 B, like that. And then final E, remember final E is the schwa sound, right? Full vowels go to schwa sound, spelled with an E, remember in Middle English. Now final E represent long vowel, right? So mad and made, strip, stripe, later will become stripe, but here is strip, like that. So you put the final E instead of the macron also, right? So this complicated the matter, the issue further, right? And then when we study American English later, maybe next week, there's also the manual for spelling words in American English, right? And one supporter for that movement was Noah Webster, right? You guys know Noah Webster, the guy who came up with the Webster Dictionary. So that's him. So that's why American people spell things differently from British people, because there's this kind of movement also in American English, right? Now, this is another issue, etymological respelling. Etymological respelling. So, you know, etymology. Etymology is the study, right? Etymology, OG is the study. So etymology is the study of the history of a word, right? Etymology is the study of the history of a word, right? Now, there's etymological respelling, which means that, you know, this is the Renaissance period, right? So people go back to Greek and Latin sources, right? Now people have a lot of knowledge, right? Because they go back to Greek and Latin sources. So all of these words like ME, Middle English, we borrow from French, remember? We borrow from French. Throne, anthem, author, right? Throne is like throne for the king, right? Anthem is like the song that you sing, national anthem, like that. Author, you know, writer. So all of these are French, right? And French came from Latin, you know that. However, during the Renaissance period, people go back to Latin and Greek sources, right? They go back to read those sources. Now they found that, oh, in Latin, it was spelling differently. It was spelled differently. So in Latin, there's the H th, right? So people put h in there. And anthem also, there's the h after the t. And in author also, there's the h after the t, right? In Latin sources, right? But in the French sources, no h, right? Now, when people go back to the Latin and Greek sources, they see, oh, in Latin, there's the h. So let's put it there. Let's put it back there because the ultimate source is Latin. So let's put it back. Now, how do we spell throne? T-H-R-O-N. A-N-T-H-E-M, anthem. And author, A-U-T-H-O-R, like that. And not only in spelling, we also pronounce the th, right? When we pronounce the word throne, we stick the tongue out, the theta sound. Anthem also, author also, right? So this affects both the spelling, right, and the pronunciation. So two things at the same time. Because people go back to Greek and Latin sources and stick the h back in there because they think that it should be ultimate source, that is the right source, like that. The same with L. The same with L. When we borrow from French, there's no L. Faute and vault, like that, right? Which means wrong, right? Vault is the place where you keep things, right? Now, in the Latin source, faultus, there's L. F-A-U-L-T-U-S, faultus from the Latin source. And vault also, there's an L. So let's put the L back there, right? And then in pronunciation, we also say fault with an L, vault with an L, right? So it affects both the spelling and the pronunciation. However, the story is different with the B form, right? The last one here. When we borrow from French, there's no B. Det, doubt, subtle, right? There's no B. However, in the Latin source, there's the B in spelling. Debtus, like that, in Latin. D-E-B-T-U-S. Doubt, dubitare. D-U-B-I-T-A-R-E, like that, dubitare, to question, to doubt. However, so people put the B back in, right? However, in pronunciation, it's hard to say debut, like that. So people resisted pronouncing the B. So nowadays, we pronounce it det without the B, doubt without the B, and subtle without the B, right? So in the last set, the pronunciation is not affected, right? Because it's hard to pronounce the B. However, the H, the L, and the B were put back in because people thought that, oh, the Latin source must be the ultimate correct source. And then there are also mistakes that people did. Like, these are all native words, like the word Elon, which is island in Middle English. That's not borrowed from French. That's not a foreign word. That's not from Latin. And also the word il or el, which means the passage between, like this. This is the aisle, right? Passage between two sides of things. These are native English words. However, they happen to look like Latin words. Isle or isle, or I think in French is Island or something. So they happen to look alike. As you can see, they look alike, the Latin sources and the French sources. So people thought that these are no longer native words. So they put the S in there. They put the S in there because of the similarity between the native words and also the Latin words. So this is a mistake, false etymology, because they happen to just look alike, even though they are not borrowed, right? And then finally, the analogy here means that we borrow the word delight from French, right? And this is exactly how it's spelled. However, in Old English, if you remember in Old English, there are words that were spelled with the yo, remember? Like the word light that used to be spelled like this, right? With the yo, like this, remember the word light, which we pronounce as the X or the C, right? Remember that? Now, people, again, mixed up. We borrow the word delight from French, right? Delight from French as is, just like that. However, in Old English, there's the word light, which is a native word, right? So people thought that, oh, this light and that light from French, they are the same. So what people did was, okay, now that this would change to GH, right, in Middle English and in early modern English. So the French word delight should be changed in the same direction as well. So we spell delight with I-L-I-G-H-T, like that. So that's the wrong, right? Wrong, or maybe you don't have to say that it's wrong, but it's based on analogy, comparison to the native English word light, right? Because in the Latin form, there's no GH, there's no GH, right? But people made that analogy, okay? So for the alphabets, for how to spell the letters in early modern English, generally the same as Middle English alphabet. One thing is that the yo is lost, replaced by either the G, as you know, G or Y, right? G or Y, as we saw in some texts. Now, this one, so the yo is lost, represented by the G, right? Or GH or Y, G, GH or Y. Now, this is the thorn, remember? The thorn will give way to TH ultimately, right? However, in the early modern English period, there is also the use of Y to represent the thorn or the TH, right? The reason is that when the first printing presses came to England, the first few printing presses, you know, we brought the printing presses from the continental Europe, right? And in continental Europe, thorn is the runic letter. Remember the runic letter, only used in, by Germanic people, right? So the printing press didn't have the type font of this thing. There's no keyboard for this thorn, right? So the closest thing that they have is the Y. So that's the closest thing that they have, okay? So they start replacing the thorn with the Y, right? However, they might do some kind of notational marker, like put the T above here, put the E above here, in order to show that that's the TH, that's the thorn, rather than just a Y. So you might see in old text the Y representing the TH or the thorn, right? As in ye old bookshop, meaning the old bookshop, like that. So you'll see this a lot, right? Because at that time, there's no type font, there's no keyboard button for the thorn, right? Because we brought the printing press from continental Europe, and the thorn is a runic letter, right? Only used by Germanic people. Now, F and S, again, due to the printing press, F and S, they look a lot alike. They look very similar to each other, right? Because both of them involve the ascender. So if this is the line, right, the F is long like this, right? And sometimes there's no stroke here that would let you know it's the F. So S and F, they look alike, right? Because they involve the ascender and also the descender. Right? So they start to look alike. So F and S sometimes are used interchangeably in Renaissance texts, right? I'll show you Renaissance texts later on, but so you should be aware that F and S, they look alike. INJ and UNV is a different issue, right? But you already know that INJ could be used interchangeably, UNV and W also could be used interchangeably. Now, it's only around the 18th century also. So I should write this out. So around 18th century also, right? 18th century also, where I is used for vowel and J is used for consonant. And that's the same for V and W. So V, let me make it bigger. So V is used for consonant. and U, litter. Right? No, vowel. Sorry. This is around the 18th century, right? Still in early modern English, but late early modern English. This is what we have nowadays, right? This is what we have nowadays. J is used for consonant. And J and also Y, right? Used for consonant. And I is used for vowel, V for consonant, U for vowel, right? However, you know, before that, I and J could be used interchangeably, U and V, and also UU, W could be used interchangeably. Now, after the 18th century, when the rules were set up, we have this kind of scenario, which we still use nowadays, right? I for vowel, J for consonant, 0, Y for consonant, V for consonant, U for vowel, V and W for consonant, like that, which we still use nowadays, right? So for the word love, for example, we use the V because this is not a vowel, right? But you know that in Middle English, you could use anything, right? Okay. So coming back to the slide, the macron sometimes you can see the macron used, or the tilde, right? Tilde is like this sign used to represent the M or the N, because the printing press has that. Because in many European languages, there's the macron or the tilde, right, which represent the N. And then the final E, we talked about that already. Now for spelling, there's the rise of the dictionary in this period also, right? Not only spelling manuals, but dictionary also. This is, maybe you want to soften that. This is not the first dictionary. There are other first dictionaries in the English language, but this is one of the first dictionaries in the English language, which enjoyed high selling volumes, right? High selling figures during that period, and by Samuel Johnson, who was a very, very productive, very well-respected writer, right? So this is what I will show you. Dictionary of the English Language in 1755, right? Which is a big volume because it has how many words here? 40,000 words, right? And it tried to show accurate definitions of a lot of words, right? So after you borrow a lot of words from Greek and Latin, and after people started to feel the need to lay down the rules for the language, now you have to have the dictionary, right? Because, or else people would get confused what this word means and so on, right? And they use quotations in order to show examples, and also spelling was fixed in this dictionary. Now, however, there are flaws in Johnson. JS is Johnson's dictionary. Flaws meaning weaknesses, right? Because one is too Latinate, meaning the definition is based on Latinate words from Latin. For example, how do you define the word cough, right? How do you define the word cough? A convulsion of the lungs vesicated by some sharp serosity. You imagine people who wanted to know the meaning of the word cough, and when they read the definition, oh, convulsion, vesicated, and also serosity. This defeated the purpose of a dictionary, right? Because when you go to the dictionary, the definition should be easy, because you don't know the meaning of the word that you want to look at, right? But however, now you come across things that are even more difficult, right? So this doesn't make sense. It defeats the purpose of the dictionary. Network. Oh, there's the word network, by the way, at that time. Network is not a new word, right? Even though we use it with computer technology these days, we use the old word network. Anything reticulated is like to form like a net, like that. So anything reticulated or decussated at equal distances with interstices between intersections. Now you don't know what it is, right? You still don't know after you look it up in the dictionary because it's too Latinate. And also it's personal bias, right? So of the lexicographer, meaning of the people who compile that dictionary. For example, the word oats, right? Things that we eat, a grain given in England to horses and in Scotland to people, right? So meaning that, oh, this is just a low thing or a mundane thing that you give to people, that you give to animals in England, but then you give the same thing to people in Scotland. So this is not what you want to have in your dictionary, right? You want to remove that kind of personal bias or prejudice from the dictionary, right? But here, these are two shortcomings of that dictionary, but it's the first few attempts at collecting words, compile words into respected sources. Now, we know that there's a need to fix the language. We know that there's a need for people to lay down the rules for the language. And in this period also, there's the origin of the English Academy, right? Late 17th to early 18th century. English Academy, you guys have that also in Korea. Kukrip, something that the National Academy of the Korean language, where they produce dictionary, where they revise the rules and so on, right? There's this English Academy originating in that period also. The main goals are to standardize English, right? To regulate the English, standardize meaning having people or having the same thing for everyone. Same spelling, same grammar rules, same pronunciation. That's what standardization means, right? Same thing. Like standardize, not good or bad, right? Standardize meaning having the same thing for everyone, right? Having the same spelling, having the same pronunciation, having the same grammar rules for everyone. Just like your ready-to-made shirts, right? When you go to Uniqlo, when you go to Nike, if you wear an S, it should be the same thing for everyone, right? So that's standardized. Regulate the language, to put down rules for language. And proponents, people who support people who supported this movement included Daniel Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe, Jonathan Swift, Queen Anne, and so on. And there are also opponents, right? Because they think that you should not tell people, people should have freedom, liberty in how they speak and how they write. And the second reason is French and Italian academies, they had this as well, the same thing, that the same kind of organization that was responsible for language change. But the French and Italian academies, they failed. And then they just faded away out of existence. So the opponents said that, oh, the French and the Italian academies didn't work, so our academy will not work also. And the movement died in mid-1700s because the next king after Elizabeth I, the next king was a German king in England. He didn't support the movement, and it didn't matter to him, in other words. So the movement died. And the English Academy, even though we have that now, they are responsible for other things like literature or for science, for other things, not for language. And we reform the spelling, right? We reform the spelling, we reform the meaning in dictionary. Now we have to reform the grammar also, right? So there's the demand for printed grammars, right? So there's the demand for printed grammars, just as there's demand for dictionary, there's the demand for the spelling manuals for aspiring middle classes, people who wanted to sound like they have education. So middle classes who aspire to be high class people, right? So they need the printed grammar to give them the rules. And this has to do with the spirit of the times of Renaissance, Age of Reasoning, which is in the 18th century, to purify the decaying language. People thought that English cannot compare to Latin because it's not purified, it's corrupt, right? It's not pure, it's corrupt. So there's the need to purify the language. So let's do the grammar reform, right? So the goals of the grammarians are to establish the rules because they didn't think that the rules existed before, to purify the language from just going downhill more and more, right? To stabilize and prevent future change. But this is a mission that's not possible, right? Because they try to impose rules where they assume none had previously existed. But as you guys know, there were rules, right? In Old English, how do you put endings on things? If this is a dative case, there's this ending. If this is a nominative case, there's this ending. And if this is the present tense, there's this ending. So there are rules, right? But it's not the rules that they wanted, right? So they try to impose other kinds of rules, right? But that attempt was not successful. Now this one you need to know, Robert Loth, right? Robert Loth was a very, very well-respected person at that time because of his position as a bishop of London, and he was also a professor of poetry at Oxford, right? And he knew a lot of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, so he was well-respected during that time. He was one of the proponents, people who support, he was one of the proponents for reforming the grammar of the English language, right? And the reason why I introduced this person is not only because every student of the history of English language should know this guy because it's kind of one of the standard things that you have to study, right? When you study Renaissance literature, for example, you have to study Shakespeare. So when you study history of the English language, you have to know Robert Loth. So Loth was well respected, and he supported the purifying movement of the English language, especially purifying grammar, right? He had a lot of knowledge of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and the other reason is because things that we think are right nowadays came from him. Rules of English that we think are right came from him. So that's why I introduced this person, right? So all of these are his arguments. Our language is extremely imperfect. The abuse has been long growing upon us. Best authors of our age commit many gross improprieties that ought to be discarded, and so on, right? So he wrote this manual, A Short Introduction to English, in 1762. He proposed the scientific, you see scientific in quotation marks, because we don't think that, because linguists do not think that it's scientific in any way. Just telling people how to write, how to read, how is that scientific, right? Use classical grammar to analyze English, that's what he meant by saying scientific. Use classical grammar based on Latin and Greek to analyze English. People wanted an authoritarian to tell them how to read and how to write, and this book sold well. 22 editions of the same book within 100 years, within 50 years. So it was a big hit, right? Now, prescriptive rules, examples that Loth gave to you. 1, no double negation. This is what we have nowadays, right? In English, you cannot use 2 negative words together, or 2 or 3 negative words together, because if you do that, 2 negatives in English destroy each other and are equivalent to an affirmative, right? So this is the rule that we have nowadays. However, it was from this guy. But remember, when we look at the Old English text, we have double negations, right? No man, not do anything, right? In Middle English also, Middle English text that we look at, in Shakespeare also. But however, when this guy came along, he said, oh, no double negation, because 2 negatives will cancel each other out and you will have a positive meaning out of it, right? Just like what you do in mathematics, for example, right? And now we followed him, right? Which in fact doesn't make sense, because in many languages, Spanish, French, you have to do double negation to be correct. So this rule is not scientific, right? Because in other languages, you can have double negation, right? And no stranded prepositions. Stranded meaning left away at the end, okay? Who do you want to talk to? Not right. How do you have to say that? You have to not put it at the end, so put it somewhere else. To whom do you want to talk? Like that. To whom is supposed to be the correct one. This girl I went out with, not correct. According to Loth, we should do, this is the girl with who or with whom I went out, right? This is the girl with whom or with who I went out. But as you know, maybe 99% of the time of people in the modern days, right, say it like this. Who did you talk to? Who did you go out with? Like that, right? So this rule was not successful, right? Or maybe it's only successful in written language. But nowadays, though, in newspapers or even in academic writing, this stranded preposition method is accepted already, right? So this rule was not successful, not quite successful as the first one. No double comparative superlatives. Next one, okay? No double comparative superlatives like this is more, better, this is more, bigger, this is most, biggest, like that. You cannot do that, double. Because if you have the ER, then you cannot use more. If you have the EST, no most, like that, right? However, in Shakespeare time, and if you read Shakespeare used a lot of comparatives, or double comparatives, double superlatives in Shakespeare. And Shakespeare was credited or has been credited as one of the greatest writers of English, right? So this rule succeeded, right? It's become a success because nowadays we don't say he's more happier like that. So this rule is a success. However, before that, Shakespeare even used double comparison. Right? Next one, no split infinitives. You guys know infinitive, right? Can I go back to no stranded preposition? The rule was based on Latin. In Latin, there's no preposition. So there's no preposition because they use the dative form, right? Just like Old English. So to Loth, to this guy, stranded prepositions are wrong because in Latin, there was no such thing, okay? Also in Latin, there's no double comparatives, no double superlatives, so it's wrong in English to do that. Now split infinitives also. Do you remember how do we do infinitive in Old English? In Old English, there's the and ending, right, at the end of the verb. Love is lufian, right, an ending. However, as you know, the an ending faded out to schwa, spelled with the e, remember, in Middle English. And in early modern English, in terms of grammar, there's no ending anymore. But we use the preposition to indicate that it's the infinitive, okay? However, Loth said that the infinitives cannot be separated. Like the word to and the word make cannot be separated by anything like an adverb here, right? Because in Latin, just like Old English, the infinitive cannot be split because it's the ending, right? Lufian in English. In Old English, an cannot be split, right? So this is the same as Latin because Latin has a lot of inflections. So in Latin, you cannot split the infinitive. So in English, you cannot split the infinitive too, according to Loth. So this is wrong. How to correctly make French toast. This is wrong because the word to and the word make are separated by the adverb correctly, right? This rule, I think at this time, at this period, is partially successful, partially. Not to the extent of double negation, not to the extent of stranded preposition, not to the extent of double negation or double comparatives, but more successful than stranded preposition. Because sometimes when I write split infinitive like this in my paper, the reviewers of my paper said you should not split it like that. Right? How to correctly talk to people like that, you cannot say that. So this rule enjoys partial success, more success than standard preposition, but only in written language, right? No use of ain't, as you know. When you study English for the first time, you have to negate it. Isn't, am not, aren't, right? Wasn't, weren't, like that. Have not, has not. You should not use ain't because ain't is so wrong, like that. So from who? From this guy, Loth. Okay? So as you see, all of these rules are in some way still lingering around these days. Right? So the consequences of grammar reform are that PD speakers observe many of Loth's rules, right? As I pointed out, no double comparative or superlative, and no double negation like that. But some only observe in writing, like split infinitives, ending the sentence with a preposition, even though ending the sentence with a preposition is really not that strict right now, right? So correct usage nowadays was a moral issue, having to do with people having no judgment. People don't know what is right, what is wrong. People don't have education like that. So the matter of language is no longer just language, but it also conveys that you don't have education, you don't know what is right and wrong, you are damaging the language like that. So because of these people, right? What's the next issue? Oh, I think this is the last slide. So we have 15 minutes, but since many people are not here, so I'll be kind today. I'll be lenient today. So we can stop here for today, and next time we'll do sound changes and also grammar changes.